Hey folks, do you want to know how I get my 100% FDM prints looking smooth and sexy like, well, you know? Or how to get those lovely smooth abs you've always wanted? Or maybe you want to take a stab at some other areas that need a bit of a touch-up. Here's my simple 5-step guide of how I get my 100% FDM prints looking crisp, clean, and more than just a little bit mean. Right, before we start, I'm just going to caveat that this is just the way I do it. I'm just sort of made up as I went along. There's probably better ways to do stuff. So if you do see anything I can do better and more efficiently, then let me know in the comments. But hopefully you'll take some ideas out of this yourselves and see something that might be of use to you. And as this is a bit of a clips show, it will feature some of my greatest hits, like my second video of the alien head where I was using trash bags as light diffusers, as well as the projects I'm right in the middle of and aren't finished yet, which is actually quite a lot of them. So my first step is STL prep. I tend to go for models that have got big details, you can print them big, nothing too small and fiddly and intricate. And the sort of thing I'm looking at is just trying to get a good orientation that will give a good base to print from. Take this platform from this amazing Jurassic Park STL from Gambody. I actually wanted to print it vertically so that the top details will actually look better than if it was printed flat as the creator intended. But unfortunately, the base was cut into quarters with curved edges. And because I couldn't see a full version of the platform in the file downloads, I just made my own by lining up the 4 quarters and pressing Command J to make them all one object. Hopefully a lot of the time you won't have to do any edits like this. I'm just showing you my thought process to try and get the most out of the STLs that we get provided. Blender is free, quite intuitive, and the processes I use are very beginner friendly. I then made my own perfectly straight cuts using booleans, and I'll explain what they are in a second, so that I could print each quarter vertically. I even created this subsection here so the leaves of this bush wouldn't need as much fiddly supports underneath them. I also did a few little edits on things like the hands so that the claws would print better, and just cut them up so they've all got flat bottom to print from, and took a slice off the top of this tyre so I can print the tyre without the detail at the bottom needing supports that could ruin the finish. A real quick explanation to what a boolean is that I mentioned earlier, just a way that a 3D program can use overlapping objects to make edits to either of the objects, either combining them or cutting parts away from them. Loads of amazing tutorials online if you're interested in finding out how to do them properly. I prefer using booleans over other techniques because they're quick, they're easy, and it means I don't have to directly edit the mesh, because some of these STLs are so detailed that they even make my 4090 graphics card slow down when trying to edit them directly. The next step that I do is obviously set them up for print, but the key point to make here is push your printer settings right up to the maximum and make your printer do all the work for you. It's often a big criticism, a lot of the time I get in comments anyway, is why bother with FDM because it takes weeks and weeks to print anything. Well, that may be true, but if you're not in a hurry and you haven't got access to a resin printer but want high quality figurines, so just set it to the maximum quality and the slowest speed that you feel happy with. For instance, with this Joel head, even though it was really large and not exactly a miniature head, I still swapped over to my 0.2mm nozzle, but I decided to stop at 0.08 layer height because I'm not completely insane. And as you can see, it took over 3 days to do a relatively small print. But the wait was honestly worth it because it looked incredible. And if you want to see more detail on this, then head over to my channel and see the full video on it. Now, if you're to follow that way of thinking religiously, you might be able to skip this next step. I certainly didn't need to do it when I printed this T800 head out that you can see in one of my other videos, but there will be times when there is going to be a trade-off, like this huge and rather amazing Kratos figurine from Wicked, where you can't crank your printer up to the absolute maximum because it's just not practical. So how do you get your print still looking amazing if you can still see those layer lines, or you need to hide all the join lines because you just cut all your pieces into even more bits, or you just need to fix some of the usual FDM printing mishaps? I'm going to seem like an absolute charlatan now, but the answer is actually resin. But at least you don't have to use a resin printer. As you can see, a thin layer of standard UV resin has just the right amount of surface tension that fills in those smaller of the layer lines, especially if you're printing around 0.16 or 0.08. You might take a thin coat or two, or you might want to absolutely slap it all over. You might even want to add talcum powder to it to make it thicker so you can fill in the bigger gaps. So whether you choose to use it little or lots, just make sure you do a few things. Firstly, be mindful that obviously the more you use, the more chance of you obscuring detail already in the model. Keep a close eye on it because it can run like buggery and get into places where you don't want it to be. Just get a rag handy and make sure to wipe it off. Make sure you give it a good wash afterwards with IPA alcohol, or water actually if you've got water-soluble resin, which I need to get some of. Give it a good brush or a wipe off to make sure you're getting rid of all that residue. And don't be a pillock like me. Wear your PPE. I'm a poet. And I wasn't aware of the fact. But after you've done all that and given it a lick of primer, up to you whether you use filler primer or not, Obviously, that's got its own issues with obscuring even more detail. You'll more than likely end up with a really smooth looking, join-free, yet still really detailed, amazing FDM print ready to take over to the painting table. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying FDM is ever going to be as detailed as resin printing, that's a given. But if you're like me and you much prefer to use only your FDM printer, there are plenty of ways to bridge the gap in quality. And to be honest, it's a gap that's getting smaller and smaller every year. So if you found it helpful or entertaining or got anything out of it whatsoever, then please consider subscribing, commenting, liking. You could even become a member, there's some great perks, or there is a buy me a coffee link in the description. But any way you do choose to support me would be amazing. I really appreciate it and it will really help my channel grow. Right, what are we up to? Number 4, I think? Okay, number 4. Once you've got your models prepped and ready for print, you won't believe how much a good paint job will further bridge that gap that I was talking about a second ago. It's all well and good looking at a print that's all covered in grey primer and picking out all the faults here and there. But once it's covered in a complex paint job, you're going to be hard pressed to tell what kind of printer or what kind of material it's made out of. Now, there is the kind of model and the kind of painting technique where you can't hide behind it, like very clean manga characters with crisp, clean paint jobs, for a good example. Obviously, you're not going to be able to hide behind that, but my personal style, if I've got one, is a sort of battle-worn, messy technique, partly because I'm not actually very accurate or patient with painting. I like getting things messy, and when you get things messy, you get things realistic. So boiling it down, the technique I'm showing today really shines when you use a sympathetic kind of painting technique that is designed to, hide and distract away from any kind of imperfection that might be from the fact that it's an FDM print. But seriously, by this stage, there probably isn't that many imperfections anyway. I mean, if you look at this T800 Arnie bust, and sadly, actually, not a lot of people did, but if you're curious, head to my channel and take a look. That I didn't have to coat in resin because I made the printer do the work from the start, then you'll see what I mean. I mean, this is meant to be perfectly smooth, shiny chrome metal, and I don't think I did too bad a job. But then when you slap a blood effect all over it, even if there was any imperfections, it's going to hide that and just make the whole thing look more appealing to the eye. So just to make that an actual point, instead of waffling, a paint job does a lot of the heavy lifting. And from viewing distance, on the vast majority of stuff I've been working on, there's not really any way of telling whether it's FDM or resin. So I think I've got one more stage left, and really it could actually be the first stage. And that is to realise that FDM can do a heck of a lot more than it used to be able to do. Heck, that's the whole reason I bought an A1 at the end of last year. Because up till then I thought FDM was just a nightmare of Bondo fillering and sanding. But then I found out just how detailed the prints could be. And if they did need a little bit of TLC, that quick coat of resin here and there would really go a long way. And plus it really kind of married in with my own sort of dirty, lived in, battle-worn, damaged paint style that things have really taken off. And I just hope people can realise it can be the same for them too. If you've not gone for resin printing because you think it's too much of a mess, or the build volume's a little bit too small usually, or the smell puts you off, etc, etc, that you can get fantastic results out of FDM printing. There's just certain things you might have to take into account. So as I always say, trust in the process. And to see more of the process, make sure to head over to my channel where so much of what you've seen in this video is covered in much more detail in their own videos. So remember to leave a like, a comment and a share. And I've also got affiliate links in the descriptions of various things I've used to create some of the models I've made recently. So what time are we on? Oh, just over the 8-minute mark. How convenient. Right, I'll let you crack on the rest of your day and hopefully it involves some FDM printing. Catch you next time.